Hey, I hope all is well. My name is Simon, and in this demonstration, I'll be showing some security assessments I've done throughout my career. So I'm gonna show some examples of cloud security. Let me log into my AWS Management Console, and I'm just gonna do a slight quick demo. Let's wait for my login. And before we begin, I just want to say I've worked in AWS Cloud Services, I worked in Oracle, I've also worked in the cloud. So I'm really familiar with the different types of security assessments conducted in the GRC environment as the tester. So I have a great understanding of what the engineers do and how they work in different environments. So let's just create an instance real quickly. And we can even do Alaska EC2 and create security groups. And this is just an example. So let's go right here. So as you see, I already have a security group, but I'm just going to create one just for an example. Go here. Now, this is not my big skill set. My skill set is more of doing the questionnaire, like asking are instances being backed up and encrypted through AES 256-bit, or are logs being centralized and gathering screenshots, and working with different teams throughout the company. But in this scenario, let's just call this companies, I don't know, let's just call this demo server 1. And of course, we're running Windows right now. And then it's going to automatically generate an instant type. And then I'll just create a key pair. So these are what engineers do at different types of teams, whether they're doing a pen test, a vulnerability test, quality scans, in different environments as well. Let's just use the basic RCA, and then I'll just call this demo TTY. Not to get too technical, but and then I just use existing security group that I created before, and then we can click launch. And I'm very familiar with the different frameworks as far as GLBA, GDPR, CCPA, NIST, CSF 2.0. So now that we created it successfully, we can do connect. Now I don't have too much of examples because this stuff is very expensive. So as this launches, so here goes one of the instance. And these are the questions I'll ask the whether it's a developer, whether it's a engineer. I'll be like, hey, we ran the random generated Excel and trying to get an instant ID. And let's say they gave us an Excel file and this is one of the instant IDs. Whether they're working in the AWS cloud environment or Google cloud environments, it's kind of the same thing. So in this example, I'll see that is running successfully as a subnet. And my job as a security assessor is to gather screenshots. So I will, in this scenario, it's going kind of slow. I have a lot of things open. So I'll use the snipping tool. And write up a nice TOD, which stands for test design, and TOE for test operating effectiveness. And really just documenting everything that I'm capturing from the different teams throughout the organization. So that's if they were using this platform. Now I'm not going to sit here and capture every screenshot, but just want to show an example. I don't know why it's not pulling up. and they're running an IPv4 versus a 6. This is just a virtual machine example that I'm showing, but so I would just go here. And then the most important thing is for auditor, or not auditors, like security assessors or auditors or GRC analysts, to always capture the date on the bottom right hand corner to show our external auditors or first line, second line, third line defense, and even regulatory individuals that we are being compliant as a company. So then this screenshot, of course, would be uploaded in whether it's ServiceNow or GRC, IRM, Archer. I've used Archer before. I use many different tools, but that'll just be an example. And then I'll get that screenshot and make it look nice. And just to give you an example, whether it's network security, it's kind of going slow right now. Let's give it a second. But some of the let's pull this down. But some of the questions I would ask is because it's running a VM right now, so it's going to be kind of slow. Bear with me. So just to give you an example, some of the questions I would ask if it was, of course, knowing the different type of frameworks. You have an executive summary, you have the scope, you have defined the key findings. But some of the questionnaires that I would ask, whether it's in Google or whether it's in Azure, like how are user identities provisioned and deprovisioned. And of course, I'll be very prepared before the meeting. We're working with our data stewards or our SMEs or SMCs or subject matter consultants, depending on what their specialty is. But my specialty would be doing a security assessment. I would ask is MFA being enforced to all users, admins, and service accounts. And of course, I would they'll walk me through it, and then I would also see it for my during the testing cycle, or I will get a random cycles. I will get a year's worth of sample, and then do a random generator, and then from there I will see if we pass the audit. Of course, it's best to do things internally. So as I do the test, I'm not only looking for policy and documentation, but also if the policy and documentation is being up to date on a year-to-year basis. This would be like for, let's call this IAM for Identity Access Management. And we can just pull that. And of course, this would be done in a tool like Archer and a tool like ServiceNow IRM, or even I'm not really sure what the company uses, but I'll learn the user interface. And of course, this would be more of the TOE, so test of operating effectiveness. And this will all go in a tool, but of course, I'm just trying to show it in a Word doc. Let's do this and have these questionnaires, of course, numbered or bulleted. Yeah, another question would be how often are access reviews performed? So that'd be kind of for identity access management. And then you have different for governance, risk, and compliance. We had to ask questions in regards to that, even though it's all kind of the same thing. It kind of all blends in for GRC. It'll be different type of questionnaires like ensuring that we're compliant. Right? Is there a formal? Oh wait, it's all pulled. or baseline, right? So these are the questions we'll ask. And like, are periodic cloud security assessments performed, or are change management processes documented and followed? So that would be another question to ask: are change management processes documented and followed? And of course, we don't live in a perfect world, but it's good to do things internally and find if there's any gaps, or just understanding what the engineers do and what the different teams do. And I've also worked with callers tools. I've worked with different data loss protection tools. I've tested firewalls, configuration management. I've configured things. Also worked with system information event management tools. You also have backup and recovery questions to ask. So it may be a situation where backup, and these are like there's like 10 CISSP security standards. So you have identity access management, network security, data protection, logging and monitoring, workload security, application API security, backup and recovery, and so on and so forth, and third-party responsibilities. So I've done that throughout my experience, my 7 years experience. So if we're doing backup and recovery or disaster recovery, and of course there'll be a detailed answer like such and such ensured, like such and such team ensured that X, Y, and Z occurred, just depending on the tool and the system. Then we can do this as well. And it's all based on judgment. That's what I like about this role, about being a security assessment tester or just a data security analyst or a GRC analyst. Is kind of technical, but it's at the same time, it's documentation, reading documentation, building SOPs, developing questionnaires, and working with, and it's very dynamic. So you're working with you're working with all different teams, whether it's all the cloud security teams, whether my niche would be working with legal and finance. It just depends on what the role requires me to do, but I can pretty much adapt and essentially do it all. Just take me a couple weeks and then I'll get the ball rolling. Our backups configured, and I've also queued A2 for different teams. And another one will be, is there documentation for disaster recovery? So on and so forth, but not to get too deep into the questionnaire part. But this would be more of a test of operating effectiveness, and test and design will be gathering those screenshots and gathering those policies. So let's go back to our exercise. Kind of want to give an example of, wait 1 second. Let's pull this up right here. Previously on AWS, so let's go to Azure. Pretty much the same thing. And okay, yeah, I'm logged into my personal. You could have virtual machines, but let's say this is kind of an example that I had Microsoft Cloud Defender. So it would be the same thing, just asking those different questions and reviewing the Explorer. Of course, I don't have any live data or any live, I guess, corporate data or anything, so everything's going to say 0 or compliant. But of course, if you have my job will be asking those questions, or those posturing questions, not posturing questions, but questions to ask more questions, but not to get too deep in the weeds. But essentially, most organizations are compliant and meeting all standards, but just asking those different type of questions, like when was the last time your regulatory compliance was adhering to standard ISO 2107? Or it can be as simple as asking, how often do you do reboots of your Microsoft Defender Cloud? And then I'm currently writing a questionnaire right now But you can also look at data and AI security, network security. You can also ask, let me bring up my Word doc that I just had up. So as you see, you have Azure firewall, then you have DDoS. Then of course, you have a different type of firewall manager. So my job will be just gathering these screenshots with the date on the bottom, showing that we are adhering to the standard. And some questions would be, again, if they're doing a pen test. And then we'll write, of course, in the summary and say the test of design is operating effectively, and we'll do accept the test at 100% if it is at 100%, and the same thing with the TOE. It just depends on the test, the team, and how we're administrating it all. But some of the checklists would just give me 1 second as my computer load. Yeah, so pen test example question I would ask is, are the PIM enabled for all users? Meaning, are all the privileged identity management enabled for the admin roles? Or are access reviews performed by groups, apps, or privileges? So we could say our access reviews, and again, I'm just making this up as I go. And of course, there will be always an agenda. Like if I had a question there, like it will be in the meeting agenda, and I'm a self starter, so and I'm perfectly fine with working Pacific time zone, so I'm open to that as well. So groups, apps, and privileged. I'm open to working East Coast time zone, Pacific time zone. And you can also ask, is it are the pen tests TLS, right, 1.2 or 1.3? And that stands for Transport Layer Secure. You can say are the, and this is what you would discover by doing the pen test, are the data protection, typing too fast, let me slow down, data protection and storage security at industry standards. And if it is, I'll put yes. I'll say the data security data GRC tester ensured that all standards are adherent, compliant. Adherent and compliant. So that'll be some examples. And of course, this will all go into an actual tool, just depending on what the tool is, whether it's IRM, GRC tools like Audit Manager. I've used a bunch of different tools to conduct these tests. Let's unbold this. Make it look nice, and it's all about making it look presentable. So that'd be an example. And let's say if it's if they're running penetration tests or vulnerability tests on the command prompt, I'll ask them to run this for me or run it for me, but show me the timestamp and the date of the different type of APIs that you're running or different ADs or Active Directories. Whether it's in Windows or Macs using a utility or a command prompt. But so different types would be identifying if the control test is identified network scanners, it'll be to identify open ports or any perform detections, or in the DNS network environment, basic DNS lookup. So a basic DNS test lookup would be just NS lookup. This would be the query lookup, and then of course there'll be a number in there. So this will come up in the and I'm running a Mac VM virtual machine, so that's why you see two different dashboards. But yeah, so that'll be now it's going command prompt. Yeah, so those would be ran in the command prompt. But as I do that, so we're monitoring. So I'll create the dashboards, and then you can look at the activity logs. So in the command prompt, you may be able to see. Let's let this load up. This is what they'll show me while conducting a test, and then I'll gather screenshots and make it look nice and tidy in our tool, just depending on what tool we use. So they showed me something like this. I just ran a command prompt. If they showed me something like this was their SOP guide or standard operational procedure. I'll actually see manager sign off or like review it on, I guess, January 2025 to January 2026. Right? If I see 2025 to 2026, I'm like, okay, it's been reviewed, it's been signed off, and I may ask for automated emails to be signed off, just depending on what the control is, depending on what the test. Okay, oh no, it didn't actually. Perfect. So if we want to review some dashboards, have a great understanding of that as well. So may I review all the activity logs, and I'll gather screenshots, of course, and then the screenshot will go from here to here. Be like, okay, this is good. We see some that show a status of succeed, and some have failed for whatever reason. But we know that there's no like false positive. Everything was succeeded, or if everything failed, then that'll be an issue because everything won't be perfect and everything won't go wrong. So this is good. So an example would be me asking those probing questions, and then of course, and the snipping tool would just be an example of like showing that the administrator of the tool is adhering and is basically doing their job essentially. And it's all about communication style and knowing how to work with the users and letting them know that like we're here all to work together, and if there's improvement we can do this X, Y, and Z. And then what I can do is I can just save this, but once it's saved on my let's just call this just a random screenshot. And of course these screenshots will be uploaded, and of course they'll be labeled a certain way. So of course I won't call it screenshots. I may call it activity log underscore 2025 underscore and put the team name, just depending on how the team works, or just being a sponge and just being very organized with my work. So of course I'll save it as a PDF file, and I'll also, and like for example, when it gets uploaded, you'll see the date right here, and this is just this would be an example of a security assessment test. So you can also look at alerts. If I'm asking, may I see all the security alerts? Or I might ask, may I see all the different metrics? And of course everything is 0 because, yeah, no, I didn't. So you can even add metrics in here as well. But whether there's specifically like this or being more of a tester, I like doing the testing and the drafting and documentation. So let me get up out of all of this, and feel free to add me on LinkedIn. Let's see where, and here goes my LinkedIn. Feel free to follow me, and I have references as well down here. So feel free to add me if you do have a LinkedIn. And my resume is on my page as well. And I just finished a 6-month contract. So majority of my career was contract roles. So I'm open to working a role where I can have long-term growth and growth opportunities. But just wanted to say thank you for your time. And feel free to reach out to me. And I look forward to an interview. And thank you and have a blessed day. Thank you.